Awesome. So I've got good news and I've got some bad news. And the good news is that I'm going to make this video for you and I'm going to post it up online so that it's basically a tips and tools kind of video. And it just shows some things that we probably could have learned along the way that would have made our lives easier. But we're just going to learn them all in this one video. The bad news is I've already made this video 2 other times. And the first time it didn't have any audio with it, and the second time it ran into the wrong format, so I'm going to have to start over and do it again, but you're welcome for that. So the things we're going to talk about is how to delete the history, how to change our infinite, or change our undo to be an infinite so that we can go back as many steps as we want. But I'm just going to start showing you some of this stuff. So the history, basically you'll see with Maya, everything that you do is stored. So however many extrudes you make, whatever it is, you always end up with a history. And Maya just remembers everything, which is good because you can step back and modify stuff, but it's bad because eventually once you have so much history, it kind of starts to bog Maya down. So we'll just look here. Once you select the object, you'll see over here you have all of your inputs, and this is the history that Maya keeps. So I started off, I made a cube, right, and then I extruded it a whole bunch of times. 13 extrusions I made on this cube, and Maya remembers every single one of those. So I could come into this last extrusion and I could modify the scale to be back to 1, and you can see right here it actually changes that extrusion, right? And I have a lot more control over kind of how that extrusion looks, which is good, which is fine. But most of the time when we do that, we're going to make this extrusion correct exactly how we want it the first time, so we're not going to need to modify those too much. Especially not coming back to like face 11, or we'll say maybe even face 10. We're not going to want to come back and change this because you can see that actually messes up a whole lot more than just those few faces that we modified. So what we want to do, sometimes this thing here, all of this, especially if we have a whole bunch of objects on the screen, this will actually start to bog down your machine, and your computer won't be able to run while remembering all of this stuff. So we'll need to do what we call delete history. And all that is to come up to the edit and delete all by type and history. And you'll notice over here when I do this, all of these things will just go away. So I'm going to delete by type history. And you see all of those disappeared. So now Maya doesn't remember how you made this object. All it knows is that you have this geometry here. And that just makes things run a lot smoother and a lot faster, so that you don't have to click and then wait for 3 seconds for Maya to register that you did something. So that usually we only run into that problem on really big scenes, but I thought I would show it to you now just because the next project we're going to do could become a really big scene, and I don't want you to crash Maya just because you have way too much history. So the next thing I want to talk about is the undo key. So I can hit undo as many times as I want, and I can step all the way back to when this was just a cube. A lot of you wouldn't be able to do this because Maya by default only keeps up with 50 steps of your actions, so you can only step back 50 times. But I want to modify that so you can step back as many times as you want until you open the project, no matter how many steps you've made. So the way to do that is to come up to Window, come to Settings, Preferences, and Preferences again, and then just come down to the undo option and make sure that your undo is on and that your Q is set to infinite. And that way, no matter how many times you undo, you will always be able to step backwards until you opened Maya for that session. So I know a lot of you have probably run into an issue where you wanted to undo a lot and you could only go back so far and it caused you a problem, so you just started over. So now you can undo as far as you want. The next thing I want to show you is with the cube, it's pretty easy to come in and see exactly where all the corners are. And there's always a vert on the corner. But if I were to come in and insert an edge loop here in the middle, when I'm on regular shaded view, I wouldn't be able to see those edges. So something I can do to make my life easier is to turn wireframe on shaded on. And that way I can see all of my edges all the time so that I know where to click in order to select an edge if I wanted to modify it, or if I had another object and I needed to connect these verts here over to those verts there, I could move them and snap them into place, and it would just let me be able to see them better. So a tool I want to show you right now is the Snap to Vertex tool, and it's housed up here. And if I turn it on, then I can only move vertices to snap in place with other verts. And normally I don't want to do that. So what I do is if I just hold down the V key on the keyboard, V as in victory, if I hold down the V key, you'll notice that my actual widget, my move widget, changes. And that's to show me that I'm on vertex snap. So I hold it down, and then if I click on it and hover my mouse over another vertex in the scene, it will snap to that vertex. This makes it really easy for getting objects ready to combine and merge, because you can see that the verts are snapping directly on top of each other. So now if I came in, I selected the two objects and I combined them, I would be able to come in, drag over that, all of those verts that are directly on top of one another because I snapped them together, and just say edit mesh and merge. Edit mesh and merge. I'm going to turn my threshold back down. What the threshold does is it merges any verts that are within a set amount of space. By default, Maya comes at 0.01. I had turned mine up to 1,000 units. So any verts that were within 1,000 units of one another, it would merge them. Now it's back down to normal, so when I apply, it will only merge the verts that were actually touching one another, which is going to be really useful when we get to the car again and we start kind of duplicating sections and we start trying to combine the hood with the side panels. Being able to snap things in place and then merge them quickly is going to be really useful. So the next thing I want to show you is a little trick with the extrude tool. So normally if we came in and we grabbed these three faces and we extruded them, they would scale down together and they would act like they were just one face, which is sometimes what you want. But other times what you're going to want is to actually extrude them and still have them act as three independent faces. So the way to do that is to make sure you turn this button here, keep faces together. If you tell Maya you don't want to keep the faces together, then it'll treat them as if they're independent faces. But when you tell it to keep faces together, it treats them as if they are one solid face. So you can see the difference here. I'm going to select these three. I'm going to turn keep faces together off, and I'm going to extrude and scale them in. And you see it scales them in independently. Sometimes the keep faces together tool creates a problem, which is why I haven't shown it to you yet. But keep in mind that sometimes you're not going to want to keep the faces together. So if you extrude from here, and all you want to do is just expand this and make it longer, then you definitely don't want to have keep faces together turned on, because even though it looks the same, you run into this problem here where now you have three independent faces, and you might have wanted them to be connected. So just remember to be sure that you know whether or not you want keep faces together turned on. As a general rule, I'd leave it checked all the time unless I know I don't need it. So that's just a little trick with the extrude tool. The next thing I want to show you is called the soft select tool. And it's a really neat tool that just kind of makes life easier, especially if we're trying to work with terrain or something. I'm going to turn the grid off so you can see what it does. Normally you come in, you'll select a vert and you'll move the vert and you get kind of a point up in space. But if you use the soft select tool, and that's housed here under the move tool, and it's just down here as soft select. And I feel like I'm talking kind of fast. I apologize for that. I have recorded this already twice before, so I'm trying to get everything done and not talk too fast, but I feel like I'm failing at that. But if you turn soft select on, you'll notice you get this kind of gradient pattern, and all it does is it moves all of the verts around the vert that you have selected, and it moves them in varying amounts depending on how far away they are from the vert or the edge, and you can also do it with faces. So you can even select faces that are not connected, and it will move them and all the vertexes around them. And you can change the fall off radius so that it selects more of them, or you can turn it so that it selects a lot fewer of them. And it depends on your preference and what's necessary. So what we're going to do for this project is kind of just use the soft select tool. We're going to make a terrain, but we'll cover that in the next video. The next thing I want to talk about is the mirror select tool, and this makes life easier, especially when you're creating symmetrical objects. The soft select tool, by the way, has a hotkey, and it is the B key on your keyboard. It is Bravo or boy, the B key. And if you hit it, it automatically turns it on or off, depending on what it was before. So now we're going to go and we're going to talk about the reflection settings. And you'll notice if I turn reflection on, when I select just these two verts, it also shows me having selected those two verts. And if I move these verts away, it moves those verts away. And if I rotate them, it rotates those. So I feel like you get the idea of what the reflection does. It just reflects anything you do to one side over the other side of the object. This is another thing that's really useful when we're making a car or other objects that have a lot of symmetry. You can just work on one side and it will modify the other side. You can even combine the soft select tool with the reflection tool. So now if I come in here and I want it, I could just, I'm going to turn my fall off radius down a little. Right? I could come in and actually modify everything symmetrically. And this would come in useful when we're making faces or even some terrain, but mostly it's really useful on faces and character structures. The last thing I want to tell you about is the camera-based selection. And I feel like you've probably run into problems with this before, where you wanted to select some faces or verts here on this side, when you drug over them, and you ended up selecting faces on the back side. You either didn't know it and you extruded and then you had a whole lot of extra faces, or it just kind of sucked and you had to come in and deselect these verts or faces on the back side. So the easiest way to deselect them is just to hold down Control and draw a marquee box over them. So anytime you hold down Shift, it will add to your selection. And if we use faces, you can see it a little bit better. So if I hold down Shift, it will add to my selection. But if I hold down Control and do the same thing, it will actually remove from my selection. So I can just hold down Control and click and remove any selection that I've made. But sometimes you want to select the faces on just this side of my cylinder. So what we'll do for that is we'll turn camera-based selection on, and then as I drag over here, instead of selecting these faces and the ones on the back side, because my camera-based selection is on, I just end up selecting the ones I can actually see. Even if I drag over the entire thing, I'm only selecting half of it, because I can only see half of it at once. So those are the basic tools I wanted to go over today, just kind of a review a little bit, and just showing some things that we haven't covered yet, but that should make your life easier as far as Maya is concerned. Camera-based selection is really obnoxious when you don't want it on, and it is, but when you need it, it's really a useful tool. So we covered camera-based selection, we covered soft select, we covered the reflection tool, we covered the keep faces together on and how to use it with the extrude tool. You need to make sure that you have the box checked before you hit extrude, because once you hit extrude, you can't change that. Even if you check the box off after you hit extrude, the faces are still going to be the way they were before you had checked the box off. So you need to make sure you do that in the right order. We gave you an infinite undo by using the settings preferences and the undo tab, and we showed you how to edit, delete all by type and history. Hopefully that will keep Maya running smoothly for you when we get to bigger projects. So if you have any questions, as always, you can email me at acarricker7615@stanley.edu. And what I'll do is I'll make another video and we'll talk about the project in that one. So thanks.